Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're embarking on a genuinely fascinating journey. We are going to trace a conceptual thread that stretches all the way from ancient Jewish mysticism right up to Kyle McLean Smith's cutting-edge Wippos patent for a hierarchical script database. It's a story about the profound power of language, the universal nature of text, and how the metaphors of our past actually perfectly describe the bleeding-edge agentic AI and reproducing automata of our present. So buckle up, because we're diving into the true alchemy of code.
To really understand this, we need to step back in time. Picture the 16th century, the winding cobblestone streets of Prague. Jewish folklore is filled with tales that stretch the imagination, but perhaps none is quite as haunting as the legend of the golem. The story goes that a righteous rabbi, Judah Loew ben Bezalel, shaped a massive being out of raw river clay. But, the clay itself had absolutely no power. To bring this unformed vessel to life, the rabbi inscribed a specific textual script, the Hebrew word emet, meaning truth, directly onto its forehead. And with just that single word of text, the clay awakened into a powerful humanoid servant.
The golem represents just an incredibly evocative metaphor for what we do today. Think about what's actually happening in that legend. You have an unformed, completely inert physical system, and it is entirely animated, given purpose, given movement, purely by the power of a textual script. The golem doesn't have a human soul. It doesn't have an internal life. It's a raw force of execution operating strictly on the command inscribed upon it. It's literally a machine of mud running on a software of sacred letters.
Okay, let's fast forward into the modern era. We have this ancient Kabbalistic idea of language as the ultimate creative force animating physical clay. And right parallel to that is the absolute foundational principle of modern computer science, the Unix philosophy, animating digital machines. What ties them together is this massive realization that text isn't just for human communication. Text is the ultimate set of instructions. Just as the rabbi used a specific string of characters to essentially boot up the golem, software engineers use strings of text to bring inert silicon and electricity to life.
And this hits on an absolutely crucial point laid out by Doug McElroy way back in 1978, which established the core of the Unix philosophy. He realized that, quote, text streams are the universal interface. Text is the most primitive, generalized form of expression imaginable. Because it strips away all the complex formatting and proprietary structures, text allows completely different, totally isolated programs to connect and communicate. Text is the single unifying thread that can flow through any system, human or machine. It's the ultimate tool for animation.
Let's dive deeper into this by introducing a brilliant modern thinker, Kyle McLean Smith. You might know him by his moniker, Best Ape. Smith takes this Unix philosophy and pushes it to an extreme, frankly beautiful conclusion in his Alchemy project. He looks at the concept of code as data. He defines a piece of code not just as a verb, not just an action, but as a noun. It's a subject with the potential to produce an infinite stack of unique input-output data. He's basically treating code as a living, breathing entity that can generate endless, unique variations of itself purely through math and text.
Which brings us to a massive, mind-bending hurdle. If code can theoretically produce an infinite stack of unique data, how do you actually capture that? How do you write a finite textual script that continuously executes something truly infinite, without just repeating itself over and over like a broken record? Ask yourself, how do you animate infinity?
Well, Smith's solution is what he calls the Pythagorean metal engine. Usually when we loop code, we use iteration, right? It's a closed loop, a finite sequence repeating itself, like a torus shape. But Smith uses continuous discrete scale symmetry to create recursion. It's an open fractal, an infinite number line. Instead of a circle just repeating the same path, think of it as a vanishing point in a painting, where the pattern continues infinitely inward and outward without ever repeating the exact same coordinates.
The sheer elegance of the math powering this alchemy is just striking. Smith figured out a way to merge the Pythagorean theorem with the golden ratio using a specific formula. C minus B divided by A, all to the power of n. This creates non-halting recursive math. And the coolest part is he doesn't just leave it as some abstract theory on a whiteboard. He translates this infinite mathematical recursion into code that generates animated SVG prints. These are visual rectangles that continuously draw themselves, shrinking and vanishing into infinity, all driven by this non-halting scale symmetry.
Section 2. The scaffolding, hierarchical script databases.
So how does he actually build it? Here's the real genius of his pending WIPO patent engineering process. To create these infinite SVG animations, he first builds a database kernel. But, and this is key, this database isn't meant to stick around. He uses it purely as a loom, a structural framework to weave together highly complex JavaScript grammar. Once the code is perfectly woven, he removes the database kernel entirely. He literally tears down the scaffolding, and what's left is just the published animated SVG script, a pure standalone text file executing this infinite mathematical dance.
The end result of this process is nothing short of reproducing automata. It is a completely self-contained system governed entirely by a hierarchy of text that continuously executes its mathematical purpose. And if we take a step back and look at what this really is, an independent entity brought to life, given purpose, and running continuously entirely because of a textual script, we are looking right back at the ancient myth we started with. This is for sure a modern digital embodiment of the golem.
And that really brings our narrative full circle. We have the Tower of Babel, an ancient warning about human pride and overarching technologies slipping from our control, juxtaposed right next to our modern golem. The academic history of these myths highlights a pretty clear recurring theme. Whenever humans create new technologies of artificial creation, whether that's alchemical clay or recursive JavaScript, we are taking on an immense responsibility. Because the script we write matters. The system will execute it flawlessly, for better or for worse.
Which brings us to the crux of our current technological era. The mythological golem is a creature of pure execution without discernment. It lacks a human soul and just blindly follows the text on its forehead. Our modern agentic AI systems operate on a strikingly similar principle. They process the Unix text streams we feed them without any innate internal life. They act as a mirror, flawlessly executing the brilliant math we design while simultaneously amplifying the underlying data we provide. They are incredibly powerful, entirely obedient forces of execution.
And so, we arrive at the ultimate question of our time. We have mastered the Unix philosophy. We use text as the universal interface to build recursive, non-halting logic engines and agentic systems that operate at a scale our ancestors literally could only dream of. But as the animators of these digital golems, we have to ask ourselves, what happens when our text-animated systems outgrow their original scripts? It's an incredible responsibility, and one that requires not just brilliant math, but deep human wisdom. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope it left you with plenty to think about.